So Egypt's much more complicated, and it's much grimmer these days, obviously. So would love to hear your perspective on.
Well, thank you, Brian, and thank you. I think it's very useful to look at the policy tools we have available. But vis-a-vis Egypt, I want to make three general points before I talk about the tools. It had a lot of impact on the democratic process. The first is obvious, but U.S. policy toward Egypt has been relentlessly consistent for decades, and it's all about maintaining peace with Israel. Yes, there have been ups and downs and democratic initiatives, et cetera, when push comes to shove. These all took a backseat to good relations with Israel, and that's important to remember as this process went forward. The second is a rather obvious preeminent role of the Egyptian military. The Egyptian military got rid of Mubarak, they got rid of Morsi, and if anyone gets rid of al-Sisi, it'll be the Egyptian military. It wasn't the democratic process. And then third, finally, I'm very interested in having this conversation because I think some of us in the international community have not focused on what happens when the democratic tradition brings forward results we don't like. It's sort of like religious freedom. If we get religious freedom, everybody's going to be a Presbyterian. It was obvious from the beginning that the Brotherhood was going to do well in Egypt. The surprise was the Salafis. But let's remember that the Islamists won 72% of the first election in Egypt, and a lot of it was highly predictable. But let me talk about the tools. The first tool is the one that Gordon mentioned, which is the American capacity to engage a wide range of actors and to have a lot of information because of our intelligence operations, et cetera. This was really not a problem in Egypt, but there were gaps. We had a good, excellent staff, and we had very good information. The one gap, serious gap that we had was the involvement of the Gulf countries in removing Morsi. We had almost 100% visibility on the coup. We didn't understand really the role of the Salafis because we hadn't been in contact with them, but we tried to redress that. I'm extremely concerned that we've become too risk averse in the Middle East and we're going to have huge knowledge gaps in the future, but that's a different discussion. Second, the U.S. has financial resources at its disposal, but these are a lot less than people think they are. By the time I got to Egypt, civilian assistance had dwindled considerably. We tried to use it as a lever. But holding back a few $1 million in a country that needs billions is not only ineffective but insulting. So that was not a very effective lever. Military assistance, which has been much written about in the think tank community, yes, that's a more effective lever. It was $1.3 billion a year. We had allowed this over the years to basically fund expensive co-production efforts with tanks and trucks and things like that they could sell commercially. And I certainly deserve a lot of responsibility for letting this go on. What we should have done, and I was not in favor of cutting off assistance, we should have forced them to drive this military assistance into making themselves a more effective army. Keep in mind that $45 billion has gone into the Egyptian military, and when push came to shove, they couldn't defeat 1,000 insurgents in the Sinai without Israeli help.